record button here for both the video and the Facebook. Welcome to our last session for Mental Health Wednesday for the year 2020. I know it's almost over, but we want to make sure to have yet another wonderful discussion about the mental health topics that Ms. Lar discusses in her videos and in her survey. And it's a very big topic. Again, it's the topic of inclusion. Ms. Lar, do you want to summarize?
Yeah, absolutely. Over the last 3 weeks, we have talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what that really means is that we are different, and that's okay. We are different, and we should be treated fairly. And if we're not treated fairly, and if we're treated differently based on our differences, we might feel excluded. And so the healing of feeling excluded in different spaces for our different identities is really inclusion. That's the answer. That's the healing for all of the division in this world, is just wanting to feel included and treated fairly, regardless of what our identities are. And so I talk about inclusion with our students to hopefully let them know that they are included in our spaces. We're never going to exclude them based on any of their identities they'll show up with at school. And I just started to realize that we did not introduce who our guests are, so we can do that after. But yeah, we're including people in the conversation of what inclusion means by having our guests here today, which is very exciting.
Perfect, which is a perfect transition. So if you could introduce yourselves one by one, what your name is, and then how you are connected to Alpha Public Schools and Blanca Alvarado in particular. And then also I'd be interested in, since we serve middle school and primary school students, I'm curious if you've had like incidents or occasions where maybe you see the topic of inclusion as a student. So I know I have a couple things to share later, but yeah, if you could include a story that maybe services when you were a student in primary or secondary school. So can we start with Mrs. Martinez Nava?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So for all the adults, I'm Cynthia Martinez Nava, and for all of our students, you can continue to call me Miss Nava. I know my husband, which a lot of you know might feel a type of way, but that's okay. I am currently the managing director of our academics in K-8 schools, which means that I get to work with all of our principals at Cornerstone, Jose, and Blanca, and it's really beautiful. I was the former principal at Blanca for 5 years, so I miss you all. I love you, and I mean, I'm still connected, so it's cool. I think you had asked Mr. S if there was any story that stuck out to me around inclusion. That's such a good question. I think two things came up. The first one is in elementary school. I went to a decently diverse school. So there was a lot of brown children, a few white children, very few Black children, and some other ethnicities represented. But I don't think, one, that at that age I understood inclusion, but I also did understand that things weren't always for me. We didn't have, when we talked about beauty, we didn't put up a brown woman on the, well, it wasn't a PowerPoint, what was it? Whatever, the projector, no, it was before projectors. And so I think, like, without consciously knowing, there was an image always being represented for me of what beauty was, what intelligence was, what stereotypes were. And I do remember thinking about that as a child. And I think it became more prominent in middle school when you're really trying to form your identity and you're trying to figure out who to hang out with. I remember at one point, and this is pretty sad to reflect on, but I had a group of white friends who did say, "Oh, you're not like those Mexicans." And I was like, I'm not really sure what that means, but that's not good. And it's hard to process that as a teenager and really figuring out what that means. So,
thank you for that.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Nelsie?
Okay, hi, my name is Nelsie. I'm a parent of a fifth grader in Alpha Blanca Alvarado. So very quickly, I was trying to think back, way back to elementary or middle school. And when I was going to elementary, I remember I was like one out of like my whole entire class, just the Latino. Most of my classmates were white. I didn't I guess I didn't know what inclusion meant, but I always felt like I didn't fit in. Like my mom or my parents would not really come into the school because they didn't feel like they belonged there. It was just like, okay, I'm dropping you off and then I'm picking you up. So I guess that's my story.
Thank you. Yeah, we really appreciate both of you joining us. This is the first time we've had someone outside really of our students and staff kind of environment. So it's a really big pleasure to have both of you in our meeting today, and really the last one we have in 2020. So we're really excited about that. This topic is huge. I mean, I can think of so many different stories in terms of my experience. The reason why I brought that up is because I think it's important to have that type of dialogue with our students, parents, and staff even as well about these things and our experiences, maybe how it's changed, maybe some of the things that still exist in today's society, in today's world of education. And Miss Laura, you brought up some great points with inclusion and representation. Can you actually elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I was telling our students today in our Mental Health Wednesday video that inclusion is representation in, when it comes to maybe powers of position where people make decisions. For example, if we had at all of our schools, all of our principals and assistant principals did not look or represent our students, say they were all 100% white. It might be very interesting to see how they would run the school and give the needs to our students based on having just different experiences. Not that their experiences are wrong or right. It might just be different and not tailored to the community that we're in. We might want to have a diverse representation of people in power in places like our school and our country, our government, so that the more diverse ideas we have, the more we can really help all of the different experiences that our students have gone through. And so diversity really shows different life experiences that might cater to a whole group of people. That way people will feel more included. They can look up and see, oh man, my principal kind of understands me. They look like me. They've had experiences similar to me. And then we need leaders that are also going to listen to people who are different. Say that we all had white principals and assistant principals, that's chill, but if they listened to our experiences too and tried to include us in the decisions or the experiences of how to run our school, that would be a great way to have allies as well. So that's what I mean by inclusion and representation is power, is we need people to have a diverse understanding when making decisions so that we can make good decisions that will help include and impact people positively.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was so eloquent. So for me, I think it would be nice to see and hear from the different perspectives we have in our roles. That we have a parent here, we have a director and a former principal, and then I myself as a teacher and Miss Laura as a counselor, on the things that we might want to change for the future, whether it be near or far. I think there's definitely an agreement that things do need to change where people, just feeling included is just a baseline thing, a simple thing just to feel included. I remember as, in recess, for example, oh man, in the virtual environment, it's a little bit different, but having recess and going out there and not being included in like a game, for example, we had tetherball back then. Which also can get very vicious. I've experienced that, but like not feeling included in something like that, it's like a big traumatic thing in some cases. But I think for me, it would be nice as a teacher to have kind of a staple class across the districts and really the country where we can explore culture, identity, all those things in general as itself, like its own kind of topic class. I know a lot of you that know me, like I talk a lot about food in particular as an example. And the one story that I will bring up from my past is like, I felt exclusive to just being Korean or Asian because of food in particular. So as a kid, there's a dish called kimbap, which is actually a very popular dish when it comes to New Year's Eve in Korean culture. And so we make that by hand. It has a lot of vibrant colors in the actual dish. Yeah, looks like, other sushi dishes, but it is a particular dish that Koreans identify with for many different reasons. And my mom made that by hand for me and brought it to school. And I think I might have told this story before with you, Miss Laura, last year, but bringing that to school as a kid, like in elementary school, and then automatically seeing people glare at me like, what is that? That's weird. That's different. Like, that's disgusting. They assumed all those things. And by that, the resulting effects were me being embarrassed about myself, ashamed about myself, and more so when I go home, I got frustrated with my mom. My direct reactions to take that frustration on my mom. So therefore, I hurt her as well. Like, why is he upset about that? Why does he not want the food? Does he not like my cooking? And among other things. So man, there are so many layers to that where I just didn't feel like I was included and it wasn't accepted. So I think the one thing that we can do, and I mean, there are some classes that exist right now in terms of like cooking, for example, but I think overall just discovering things about each other. I know I've brought it up before, but like really honing in on some of the similarities and understanding and appreciating the differences as well is a big part of the change that needs to be made, especially in education. So I'm gonna throw the baton to Mrs. Martinez Nava if you're cool with that.
Yeah, I really appreciate hearing you because it brought up memories for me, and it actually also brought up things that I've seen at Blanca that are really wonderful. So, I mean, very similar, Mr. S, when I was growing up and particularly in high school, my mom would pack pepinos, which are just cucumbers, with limon and sal, and oh my gosh, my mouth.
Oh, you're making me hungry.
I know, right? And it was something I really loved. And I remember I brought it and some kid who was walking by was like, "You're really exotic, that food." And I was like, I don't even know what that means, but it doesn't sound good. And what it meant is like, you're different. You're bringing something that doesn't belong here. And I remember it was probably last year, but also earlier on at Blanca, I saw our students bring out different food, like there was like huevo con chorizo. It was like egg and chorizo, and there was like sushi, and there was whatever. And what I really appreciated is that at least in those moments, all I heard was students say, "Oh, that looks good. Can I have some?" Mm-hmm. And that was so meaningful for me because that's not what I experienced. And so the fact that our students were responding that way was great. So I think my advice here for students is if you see something different, respond with like, "Tell me more. Like, what does it taste like?" But resist the urge to say something like, "That's gross," or "I've never seen that, that's yucky," because that, one, you've never tried it, but two, that really actually creates exclusion. And so then that's when you don't feel comfortable. So I appreciate that story, and I'll kick it off to either of you ladies, and I can add more stories later.
So hearing Mr. S's story, it kind of took me back to I only spoke Spanish when I was in elementary, and it was like that. Like people were like, "Ew, like what is that? Why do you talk like that?" And I became embarrassed of Spanish, and I became embarrassed of inviting my parents over to school because that's all they spoke, Spanish. And then now when I had my daughter, I started speaking to her in Spanish, and then when she was gonna start school, like it just all came back and hit me. And then I started speaking English, and that was her first language, English, because I was like, oh, I don't want her to go through that. I don't want her to go through the process of learning, going through ESL classes. And so, yeah, it doesn't feel good, and it makes makes you make these decisions throughout your lifetime because of people, of comments that people say of you not feeling included. And now that I'm older, I brought up Los Dichos a lot, and it's a program that I like because it's a bilingual program, and it invites parents who only speak Spanish, to participate in their child's class. So it's very powerful, to feel included. Mm-hmm. I just realized that when Mr. S was sharing his how he felt embarrassed about his food.
Yeah, I definitely had a very similar experience as well with language. And there's so many different things to talk about within the subtopics of inclusion. Ms. Lar, did you want to share anything by any chance on that?
Yeah, I think I just want to expand on how that, that was for me, how that might lead to what is like bullying today is when kids feel excluded or made to feel bad for who they are and anything really, if they don't fit any kind of stereotype, or they're not Mexican enough, not American enough, they're not girl enough, not boy enough. It's just all of these ideas that we think of what people should be. And so when people come to school and they're different from you, you could have a reaction based on just having someone be different. And I think we really want to work on helping our kids feel more exposed, embracing others, because wouldn't we want them to be embraced? Wouldn't we want their foods to be embraced, their identities to be celebrated? Oh, cool, I didn't know more about this, kind of like Ms. Nava was saying, tell me more about it. We should really see people's differences and not have an absolute aversion immediately, but remain curious, kind of be open to it, because then that openness really leads to embracing. And I would definitely have wanted all of our identities to have been embraced, because then we can preserve our language, we can preserve our cooking, we can preserve and celebrate our culture. Because I feel very sad that my parents did not teach me my languages. And that's because there was a culture of needing to fit in, because there was a culture of making people feel bad for having a language that was not English. And that needs to change. And our country is moving in that direction, which is wonderful. But that's what inclusion looks like. Inclusion looks like speaking Spanish and being like, oh, that's so cool, you speak 2 languages, or man, look at this food, I've never seen it before, tell me about it. And that could start at like kindergarten. We need that like right now. So, you know, I appreciate everyone's perspective for sure. That's what inclusion looks like for our students. That's what I'd like to happen in the future.
Yeah, it makes me think on the flip side, you say maybe the phrase I heard was not enough or less than enough. On the flip side, there are people that think there are more than enough, or there's a sense of superiority, and that could be against another person, another identity, another whatever it may be, or it could actually, in some sense, also be within the same culture as well, or in the same subculture as well. So there's that dynamic as well. And so I know you talked about like being an ally and how to approach some of those incidents. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that, Ms. Lar?
Yeah, you know, if I spoke Spanish very eloquently, which I don't, and somebody else was speaking Spanish and it was broken, I don't want to say, oh, you know, you're not Mexican enough because you don't speak Spanish. That doesn't make me more superior, you know. And then there's all these like levels, and it's kind of just needing to embrace everyone for whatever level they're at in their culture, embrace people for whatever their identity they have, even though it's different from them. As I was speaking, I forgot what you were saying, so maybe I'll pass it on to Ms. Nava. What was your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it's just really how to approach those types of incidents.
Oh,
And
allyship.
yes.
Yeah, allyship. Yeah. So being an ally means not putting down other people for their differences, and really seeing that if somebody is being treated poorly based on their identity, being bullied for their disability, their identity, their sexual preference, being an ally means standing up for that person to say, I'm with you, I don't think you should be treated poorly, and I'm going to work hard to treat you fairly, or even stand up with you for your rights to be recognized. So I'd actually be really curious if either of our guests have been an ally or have received the help of an ally in those situations. Anyone ever stood up for either of you? That'd be nice.
I think so, and I'll come back and answer that, but I am moved to share that what I thought about was what it looks like in our schools. I mean, if we're being real, our schools are currently all people of color, all students of color, whether they identify as Mexican, Vietnamese, or another ethnicity. What I have seen where we can grow and where sometimes our kids really step up is when we have newcomers or people who are just coming from their country. And I've seen both the good and the bad. The bad is when we have someone who is new to, let's say, 7th grade, and they only speak Spanish. And then within our own people of color, we start saying something like, they're real Mexican, they don't like fit in, we're not going to hang out with them at lunch because they don't speak English, even though that person speaks Spanish, and they could go and say, hey, let's hang out and let's use that language. And on the flip side, I have seen students at Blanca be really incredible and go and proactively make that friendship, go and proactively say, you know, we do things a little funny here, this is what it looks like. When you do that, it's not received well. And so I've seen our students be allies and just be really empathetic and caring, and know that it can be really difficult to come to a new space, especially if you don't know the language.
Also, I thought about something. I hope my daughter doesn't see this because she's gonna be like, "Why are you using me?" So when my daughter was in second grade, I mean, like I said, her primary language is English. I know it's my bad. I'm working on her speaking Spanish now. She's not very excited, and it's my fault. But when she was in second grade, there was a new student, and she only spoke Spanish. And she came home and she was telling me about her new friend, and then I was asking her like, oh, what is she like? What is her name? And then she's like, Mommy, I don't know a lot of things about her because she speaks Spanish. She's like, but I hung out with her in recess, and I pointed, and I painted something, and she wanted to play with me. We didn't really have to talk, but we were playing. I was like, oh, that warms my heart. And I mean, it's just amazing to see how kids can teach us a lot of stuff.
And yeah, your story, that's a basic life lessons. There are some universal languages. I mean, in my opinion, there are. And I think it reminds me growing up as a kid at my church, like a lot of times after like our first meeting, a lot of people would greet each other, and there's diversity there. And so even though we didn't speak, I mean, there are like maybe 4 or 5 different languages that a lot of folks spoke. Just in that environment, but we all said hello to each other, greeted each other, because like just waving hi or just like nice to see you kind of thing is like means so much. And yeah, it just makes me think of that. Sometimes we even though we might have barriers, can't be pessimistic in that way. That's what makes me think of that type of scenario. Oh, Miss Laura, did you have something to add?
Well, you're mentioning something that's very helpful, which is like common ground. What is our common ground? That when we all look like this, we all understand that means excited. Common ground really looks like waving, and like we understand what that means. Common ground means being human and wanting to be accepted. So I hope that all of our students can see that that's what they want for themselves. And if they want that for themselves, then they also have to offer that to other people. Like Nelsie's daughter, that's so sweet, so cute at such a young age that you just know you want to accept people. So yeah, let's stick to our common ground to begin, and then start understanding like we can be different, and that's okay.
Absolutely, and we're never in too deep where we can't make any change at all, even as adults. So we definitely want our students and our young people to understand that adults are not perfect. Just because we're older doesn't make us, error-free at all. So we also need to make changes for the better as well. But yeah, on top of that, we just want to make sure you guys understand that we always leave on this message that if you want to talk to somebody, whether it's one of us at Blanca Alvarado, our beautiful counselor, Miss Lar, or any of our teachers, we are more than welcome to have that discussion with you. If not, you can have, obviously, contact Miss Lar through email, text, or check our homepage, our student homepage, for those resources, and she can lead you to the right people to talk to. But we really appreciate, again, both of our guests. I know we basically just scratched the surface on this topic, but we really do appreciate you guys joining us and dialoguing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Everyone have a good day, and then we'll see you next year in 2021.
Bye.